Hello friends of Powerhouse Bakery, and hello divas and dudes. It's so nice to have you here at Powerhouse Bakery. I'm Suzanne Parker, and I'm the founder and CEO of this funky little bakery that loves to show the world that healthy can taste amazing. Today I want to talk a little more about teas. If you missed my last talk about teas, I'm going to give you a little review of the different types of tea, and I'm also going to tell you about different ways to use teas for medicinal purposes. What's really nice is we all know that tea is healthy, but do we know how to pick a good tea? Do we know what makes a difference between a green tea and a black tea, even an herbal, even a medicinal tea? And so I want to go over some of that and really help you see how to pick the best kind of tea, okay? So let's get started. First, I want to tell you about the different types. We have a white tea, which is actually the most pure. It's a minimally processed tea. Then we have a green tea, and we even have a yellow tea. Then we have a black, and then it goes into the herbals. So I mentioned something here, white being the least amount of processing. So let me go through, and this is a little review if you saw my last video, so I'll go quick for those of you that already heard it. When we pick a tea, the first process that happens is the teas are harvested. And to really get a good tea, you have to go high in the mountains. So we'll get more of that later. But first of all, we're going to pick the tea. And typically, it's going to be the first bud and the first two leaves of the tea. Any of the teas that are picked have to go through a sun drying process. So once the teas are gathered, they are just laid out into the sun for a varied amount of time, but let's just suffice to say that's the drying, the first stage of the drying process. The second stage is then it's brought inside, and now there's some variants. If it's Japanese style, once it's brought in from the sun, it's now going to be put into a big wok of sorts and steamed. So water is included in that process. If it's a Chinese tea, it's a big wok that's pan fried. So no oil, but just heat. So the idea is that when the leaves are dried, we are pulling out some of the moisture. The second stage, when we bring it inside, we are stopping the oxidation process. So as soon as that leaf is picked, the leaf starts breaking down. And so for us, when we want to use the antioxidant power of these tea leaves, we really want to get the least amount of processing, but we also want to have the most flavor and enjoyment from the tea. So the white tea is minimally processed, then we bring it inside, and now the changes happen. So a green tea is going to be just lightly processed. So stopping the oxidation by that heat, either by steam or just a wok. The third stage is where we get these different color teas. So green tea is just when it stops that oxidation. The yellow tea is now when it goes through another stage. So after it's been wok fried, if you will, then it gets loaded into a big pile and covered, and it gets moisturized, if you will, and that brings back some of the floral flavors. But it's kind of an unusual, very rare tea. It used to only be given to emperors, and so the yellow is the color of royalty in the Asian culture, and so that yellow tea is really quite rare now, but it is definitely one that has some floral notes. Then, if we process that tea a little more, so say we're going to roast it more, it's going to get more dark in color. So it might be in that wok longer, but what's more commonly done is once it's put in that wok, or with the steam like in the Japanese style, the next stage is to lay it all out again and roll it and pound it and bruise the outer parts of the leaves, which again adds some of the oxidation process, which again adds flavor. It also helps to liberalize or liberate some of those phytochemicals that we really want access to help us heal, and that's why we have these medicinal herbs that are really put into tea as well. So you have the green tea that is picked full of wonderful phytochemicals, and then if we stop the oxidation process and we liberate some of the polyphenols, now we're getting all kinds of wonderful qualities in that green tea. the black tea is just the one that's been roasted the most, bruised the most, and so it has those polyphenols liberated. Kind of cool, right? So in a nutshell, that's how the tea is processed. Now there's a lot of nuances. For example, oolong tea has a big variance as to how much antioxidant properties are liberated from that tea leaf. So of course, whenever we have more rolling and bruising and roasting, the flavor profile will change. So the flavors, of course, make the tea lovely. A white tea, which is least amount of processing, so the most kind of organic and minimally changed, has a very soft flavor. But what's fun is when you start learning about teas, you start understanding some of the nomenclature. How do we describe tea? So you'll start to hear things like floral, and that would be something that is minimally processed because all just that bud flavor is coming through. Then you start getting grassy flavors, and you start getting nuttiness. Even sometimes creaminess. So all of these great adjectives are helping us to better appreciate and understand the flavors that we're getting from a tea. And it has so much to do with how it's processed. So just know that this really brings in the whole the fun and sort of the nuances and specialty flavors of tea. So it really becomes a hobby, just like wine tasting and really just like coffee. There's so many things to learn about it. Now let's fast forward to HEB. What kinds of teas are we finding at HEB, and what kinds of nutritional qualities really are left with the teas when we're just picking something off the shelf? So let me go through some of those issues with you first. For example, here we have a pumpkin spice tea. So how would this relate to all the nuances that I just described from the white tea, the yellow tea, the green tea, the black, the oolong? Let's read the label and find out. So when we look at this, it's giving us steeping instructions, which is great. Ingredients: black tea, natural pumpkin flavors with other natural flavors, and in parentheses, soy lecithin. How natural is that in tea? So now my eyebrows are raising. And it then goes on to say it has cinnamon, licorice root, clove, ginger, and pumpkin flakes. So all those sound like they have good qualities, right? But what happens when we put this tea bag into our water and do these little fragments really turn into something that's as pure and as valuable as nature intended, and of course how the Chinese and the Japanese have truly cultivated into something that has amazing historical and cultural and nutritional properties. So the first thing I notice when I pull out the package is it has a really strong flavor, a really strong aroma, I should say. And so we Americans are taught that if it smells good, it's going to taste good. And for the most part, I agree with that. But do we really want soy lecithin added to our tea? Probably not. So sometimes when we get a flavored tea, we're missing out. We have more artificial ingredients than we really bargained for. Now, the other thing that I do like about this tea is it has cinnamon, it has licorice, and it has clove and ginger. So that has some nutritional importance, and it does stem back to the Chinese culture of blending herbs as well as teas in order to get something really valuable. So I had to delve into some Chinese medicine and some terminology, and I tell you, I love getting to do research for you divas and dudes because it really pushes my limits of what I know, and so I always want to learn, and I really encourage you to do that too. And I will be giving you a handout after my tea series, and everything that I study is based on scientific literature. So I just want you to know that it's not something I'm just whipping out. I really do want to understand the value, not only from the medical arena, meaning has it been tested, but is it based on a valuable science. And as we're learning, the alternative medicine approach really has become more mainstream now more than ever before. And why is that? Well, because we know that our immune system is more than just taking a pill. We know that our immune system happens when we're 3, years old, 5 years old, in our mom's tummy. Our immune system is absolutely built on a strong lifetime of choices. So if we get to spend our life making smart choices and evolving our knowledge based on science, that's the best we can do, right? And if we learn a lot of great information when we're in our 50s, well, then our job is to share it with our kids and our families so that they can also benefit from a greater time in that knowledge space. And so we know that we want to build our immune system. And when we look at Chinese culture of sort of the medicinal practices of herbs, we know that, interestingly, Chinese medicine is based around nature. And so we have wind. And so wind is an energy source that Chinese medicine kind of pulls in as a descriptor of what's happening in our bodies. So if you think of what happens with wind, it blows in and it causes a change in the climate. It pulls in cold air, and the tumultuous change could cause precipitation. That theme is pulled into how our bodies are affected. So what is the wind, or what is the environment that's changing our immune system? So again, it's some soft science, but it really is interesting to see how some of this is built. So the long story short of it is, we have two different ways that this wind or change in our internal climate is going to cause us to maybe get the common cold. So if we get some kind of virus from the wind, we know that, we wear hats and we wear boots to keep ourselves warm. Well, if we have a wind change that is based on cold, there's certain herb remedies that the Chinese medicine recommends that you follow. There's also a virus initiated that takes on the qualities of heat. Just like with the wind, we can have hot air blowing in or we can have cold air blowing in. Now we take it in an internal phenomenon and we think of the yin and the yang. So regardless to say, what they do with these descriptions is they start creating a recipe of different herbs that will help warm your body or cool your body. And that's what I want to share with you. So I'll be giving you some fun recipes. So let's look at what you would do if you want to fight a wind that's cold. So that's when cinnamon, which makes sense because this wonderful tea is pumpkin spice, so it's in the cold months. And so cinnamon and licorice are thought of as being herbs that help warm our body. And they also use a base of black tea. So we know that these, not only the flavors taste really good, but it kind of makes you want to cozy up around your cup. So that's the idea around those warming spices. Interesting too that a green tea is going to have a pretty high amount of caffeine, but it also has properties that help calm the spirit or calm the body. And so when we think of getting a nice balance of a tea, green tea is a really good one because it has those calming effects as well as some caffeine. And of course, however long you brew the tea will have a bearing on how much caffeine, but also the type of tea. So let me go to another one. I showed you one that was a pumpkin spice by Bigelow, and it's with a paper covering. So let me hop over. I want to give you an example still of what we would find at HEB. The paper covering in kind of your basic tea. A Bigelow is kind of a basic. Now we're going to go up the ladder in a little more specialty tea. And I say that because the front of pack of this particular one, let me show you the box. This is called 2 Leaves in a Bud, which is literally what I mentioned when they create tea that's true and authentic. They really do take the top bud and the 2 bottom leaves. So there's some truth behind this. But notice in this packaging, it's got an organic label. Make sure you watch my first video because I talk about the value of that organic label and if it's really important or not. Also, notice here that it gives us some qualities of caffeine. It gives us some qualities of where it's from. So a lot more detail than this little bag. That's because they're going to charge more for this. Also, what I wanted you to see is the type of covering or sachet that's used. Some tea experts say that this kind of mesh bag, and I covered this in the first video too, but I just want to make sure you see, some people believe that this mesh bag is not good for us. Kind of along the same lines of you don't want to put plastic in the microwave because the heat causes some melting of these chemicals into our cup of tea. Now, as a rebuttal to that, we don't actually want the water to be boiling hot when you make your tea. So that's probably why they justify that this little bag is okay if you follow the instructions and you don't want super hot boiling tea. It really should be around 100 and maybe 70 degrees. Now, it does say to keep it that hot in brewing it, but if you look at the experts, they say don't make it 200 degrees, make it more like 150 to 170, because it keeps the tea flavors really strong and aromatic. So we have our two types of tea bags. We have the varieties of tea that give you like your basic run-of-the-mill, and then we can go up a little if we're going to spend more. But what if we really wanted to go true, authentic, and really learn about these teas and how to do some combining to have the value in treating a wind that's hot or a wind that's cold. So before I go to the cold or treating it with a hot brew, let me show you some of these teas. So this is a beautiful tea that I got from a Shan Valley, and it's a pin green tea. So a lot of these websites love to give you information, and so I really encourage you to go onto the sites and learn about where their tea comes from and what makes it special. Look at these tea leaves. This is gorgeous. So you can really see that these are the true leaves. They're long still. Can't really see the bud, but you can definitely see the shape of the leaf is still present. And so with the green tea, remember that it's going to be dried in the sun, then it's going to be brought in, and the oxidation process is going to be turned off by heat. So either in a big wok or that's dry or with some steam. And then you get these beautiful little leaves. Now notice when I put them into the water, they really expand. Of course, to drink this tea, we're going to strain it, but I really want you to get to see the color. This is a beautiful green tea. And of course, if you buy it in this form, it doesn't come with a bag at all. It expects you to do a really clean way of processing, which just means leave out the tea bag altogether and use a strainer. So I have this little strainer in hand, so I'm going to brew it in my bottle, and then I'm going to pour it into my cup, or in this case, I'm going to show you with another bottle. And so what's really pretty about this, and here I'll just kind of pour it into here so you can see. You can see the beautiful color, and it's going to have a little bit of sediment, but of course the Chinese and the Japanese don't worry about that at all. Now they might use a very fine sieve, but for the most part they think that's just fine to have a little bit of sediment left in their tea. But it's a beautiful light color, and when we describe the teas that are green, we would describe it as grassy, avocado, range from creamy avocado to a little astringency. So sometimes astringency sounds like bitterness, but it's really more of a mouthfeel. And you'll hear that terminology even with wine and understanding the different characteristics of a wine. Astringency is kind of how it feels in your mouth. So the green tea has a headiness about it that has just wonderful properties. So if we go to the next tea, this one is going to be a green tea that has been roasted. So it's going to have a little darker complexion. So let me show you what that one looks like. So you can't really tell too much in the container. They both look very similar, which honestly I was surprised at. I expect there to be a little bit darker color, but actually what happens in the roasting, the tea leaves actually get a little bit lighter in color, which I thought was so interesting. But the tea that it makes is so beautiful. Now let's go back to the combinations. So whether the recipe is going to use a black tea or a green tea, the goal is we really want to have all the antioxidant properties of that green tea, and then we're going to start adding some herbs in order to make it good for the wind. So I talked a little bit about the cold, and so things like cinnamon and licorice are great for a tea that makes you feel warm inside. If we want to go the other direction, now we can go to more of the fruities. So chamomile, and here I've got a hibiscus tea, which is absolutely gorgeous. And so what's very common is we blend the teas together. So here I've got my green tea, and I'm going to add in a teaspoon of my hibiscus. Now I could even go a little farther and add in some citrus. That's another way to add more nutrient quality. We've not only got the antioxidants and the polyphenols from the green tea, but we also have the vitamin C. And did you know that green tea actually is a source of vitamin D as well? So there you have it. There's a lot of great nutrients. And this just becomes so pretty. I mentioned in my last video that Ayurvedic tea is one that I kind of used for my hydration teas. And the idea too is adding in other flavors. So you could add coriander and fennel, all these wonderful aromas and seeds to truly make your own tea, picking out the flavors that you like the best. Here I've got lemongrass, and so this is actually a great herbal additive for either a hot wind or a cold wind. It's got a wonderful light lemony flavor, and of course you can add honey to the lemongrass, and that's another beneficial quality to help with the wind that is cold. So it's really a beautiful lemongrass. So again, you can use the little net. You can put your tea in here, and basically you do 1 teaspoon per 6 ounces. And so when you do your own blend, you're going to want to have enough tea to make at least 2 cups. And that way you can blend a teaspoon of each and put it right into your teacup and just pour the water over it. And again, I wouldn't say you have to measure the temperature of your water, but once you boil it, let it sit for a few minutes before you make your tea. Now, let me show you one more. Look at this beautiful ginger root. This is just pure dried ginger, and it smells so good. Again, this is one that's going to be good for as an anti-inflammatory. It's got antibacterial properties, not to mention the antioxidant qualities. So adding this to your green tea, whether that green tea be toasted or just pure, or you could even use the white tea, which I don't have today, but a white tea would again be really high in those antioxidants but very soft in flavor. And pairing that with some ginger is a really neat way to make your own tea. And then you could add some citrus, and now you've got a great combination of vitamin C, the antioxidant power, as well as the anti-inflammatory and the antimicrobial. A lot of antis in there. But starting with a nice simple green tea, adding some citrus, and adding some of this beautiful herb, ginger, as well as a little lemongrass. And don't be too hung up about the amounts. You know, you can start to experiment. I'm going to leave this in the refrigerator probably for a good hour, and then I'm going to strain it. If you know that your palate does not like that astringency or the tartness or even the grassy flavors, let them brew a little bit less. And also look for a tea that's more of a light green tea. Always, though, get familiar with the unscented teas that are very simple, and you're just buying the pure flavors of greens, blacks, even yellow or white, and then adding your own herbs so you can start to really understand the nuances of the flavors and the aromas and the wonderful benefits of the antioxidant power of plants. So I hope this has helped you. Just in closing, I'm going to show you one more that I think is so interesting. Notice that this one is finely ground up. Look at the difference. Now, this one is pure, and this one is a very interesting blend of herbal chocolate chai. So Chinese, Japanese, very basic, kind of your ultimate tea. And this is kind of the all-American, throw everything in there and see if it tastes good. We even have pieces of dark chocolate and pieces of cardamom. And, well, that's just a shell, actually. So you're not sure what you're getting. So do your own taste test and see which one you like the best, not only to fuel your antioxidant routine and to manage your wind, but also see which one works best with your palate. And if it smells really strong and sweet, probably has a lot of additives. If it smells earthy and grassy, and a little bit nutty, oh, it's amazing. So you get to do your own taste testing, and if you ever come by Powerhouse Bakery, I'd love to let you try some of my hydration teas and see what combinations I've put together. So thank you so much for exploring teas with me, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye-bye.